The self-managed superannuation fund, or SMSF sector, is the fastest growing segment in the industry right now. But SMSFs may not be for everybody. With me in the studio today, I have Anne-Marie Esler from Centric Wealth Advisors to take us through some of the different superannuation structures and who they might be appropriate for. Welcome, Anne-Marie.
Thanks, Darren. Thanks for having me.
So what are the main superannuation structures available for people to choose from?
There's a number of different structures people can use to save for superannuation. Retail funds, which are called public offer funds, corporate funds, industry funds, self-managed super funds, and also small APRA funds. So a number of different structures that people can choose depending on what they're expecting from their superannuation.
And who would be suitable for an SMSF, and what would they be looking to get out of it?
People that have sufficient time, assets, and appropriate skills to dedicate to running their own fund. What they would be looking to get out of it is things like control and flexibility. And when I say flexibility, it's in terms of investment choices. They might be interested in investing in direct property, for example, which you probably wouldn't be able to do through other types of super funds. And also estate planning. There's generally more flexibility through a self-managed super fund for estate planning, for your estate planning options to be met. But then, of course, with all of that control and, I guess, increased flexibility comes the responsibility of being a trustee of the fund. And that's really an important consideration when you're looking at whether or not to choose a self-managed super fund. You are responsible for the administration, the compliance, all of the running of the superannuation fund. So that obviously has a lot of responsibilities associated with it.
You mentioned small APRA funds. What's the difference between an SMSF and a small APRA fund?
They're both small funds, which means the maximum number of members that we can have is 4. The difference though, the main difference, is that a self-managed super fund, you are the trustee as well as being the member. So you're responsible for managing and running the fund, whereas in a small APRA fund, an approved trustee runs and is responsible for the compliance of the fund. So that's where the main difference is. But in terms of flexibility and to some degree investment options and the ability to be able to invest in a different variety of assets, they're very similar.
So who would be suitable for a small APRA fund?
Small APRA funds are suitable for people that, like a self-managed super fund, like to have some degree of flexibility and like to have some choice in their investment options outside of the standard investment options that are available in, say, retail public offer funds. However, they don't want to be responsible for running the administration, the compliance, and having the responsibility of a superannuation fund. They're also for people that have maybe had a self-managed superannuation fund in the past, but can no longer have the time or the interest to run their own fund, so they might switch over to a small APRA fund. It also applies for people that may be going overseas for a few years. And self-managed super funds have, some residency rules around them. So for people that are going overseas for an extended period of time, it's usually beneficial that they swap into a small APRA fund instead of maintaining that self-managed super fund. So that's one specific example of when a small APRA fund might be beneficial.
You also mentioned public offer funds. Who would be suitable for those?
I guess there's 2 issues to look at when you're thinking about the type of structure and whether or not a retail master trust or public offer fund or industry fund is suitable for you. The first one is really about how much involvement you want to have in running the fund. So for people that have little interest in running the administration, making sure the fund's compliant, choosing their own specific investment options and assets that they'd like to invest in, then it might be worthwhile that they choose a retail public offer fund where the administration, the compliance and all the responsibility is taken away from them. And they're a member of the fund, they have a set number of investment options in which they can choose from. Sometimes there is a lot of flexibility in terms of being able to choose direct share investments as well as managed funds, and there could be a range of hundreds of different investment options to choose from. But you won't get the same degree of being able to invest in additional asset classes such as jewellery or artwork or direct property, for example. So it's for people on the one hand that just are not interested in running their own super fund. And I guess the second part of it is the cost. For a lot of people, it's more cost effective to be in a larger fund with a larger number of members where the fees associated with that fund are a lot less than they would be if they were running their own self-managed superannuation fund. So generally it is recommended that people with larger account balances even firstly look at going to a self-managed super fund just because of the costs involved. So with those with smaller account balances would generally be better suited to a retail public offer fund.
We've discussed several different structures. What would be the consequences of choosing an inappropriate structure for your superannuation needs?
Consequences are really about what your expectations are in the fund and what you expect to get out of your superannuation structure that you've chosen over the number of years that you're investing through that structure for your retirement benefit. So if you have certain expectations about how much it's going to cost, or the different types of investment options you have, or the flexibility that you have with estate planning, for example, you need to choose a structure that best suits you. So it's really about managing, thinking about what your expectations are for your superannuation structure and choosing, therefore, the most appropriate vehicle for you to save for your retirement. I guess the consequences are that, first of all, those expectations aren't being met, but also I think, especially in a self-managed super fund, the consequences of you not complying and therefore breaching some of the rules, for example, are quite harsh. So those consequences could include penalties, fines, disqualification as a trustee, and even that your fund becomes non-compliant. So obviously, that's something that you wouldn't want to happen. So you really need to think about those consequences when entering into a fund such as a self-managed super fund, where you are responsible for all of the actions and everything that occurs within the fund.
Thank you, Anne-Marie.
Thanks, Darren.